Suresh, we covered till web services, right?
Yes, sir. REST services, something we have started, right?
Yeah.
So how are you, Prasad?
I'm good.
Because I got a message that you are not feeling well. Oh.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm doing well now. Yeah.
Okay, great.
And the REST APIs, we didn't see how they work, is it? Or did we execute a couple of them also?
No, but SOAP web services, we have seen that, but next day we're supposed to take this one, REST API.
REST services.
Anyway, for me, no issues. Anyway, I know that. Okay, we are part of OIC team.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. Got it. Let's wait for a couple of more minutes, guys, and then we'll start the session. Hello everyone, good morning. I'm sharing my screen. So in our last session, we were exploring the web services, and I've explained the basics of it, and we have seen how the SOAP service works as well, right? So we picked up a standard SOAP service. I believe we picked up a journal import service. We have understood the operations that are available. We have understood what a WSDL is all about, and we have kicked off the web service, and we've also gone through the slides related to SOAP as well, right? So a SOAP service, it has an envelope element, header element, and a body element, and a SOAP message or a SOAP services use XML format for communication. So we have covered all of this in the previous session, and we've talked about what a WSDL is what a WSDL contains and what does it stand for. And in today's session, we will look at how you can use REST APIs to load the data into cloud application and at the same time to extract it from the cloud application. And to do this, what we can do is we will go into the documentation link. So similar to where we picked up a SOAP service from. So if you go to the Oracle Cloud documentation link, so for the SOAP service, we went into Oracle Cloud documentation link. Go to the module of your choice. If you are interested in HCM, you can go to Human Resources. If you are interested in Financials, go to Financials. And you click on Integrate option. And in the SOAP services, we went into this option. And from this, we picked up the journal import service. And then we have seen how the SOAP services work with the help of that example. And to review the REST APIs, or to see what REST APIs are exposed by Oracle to interact with Financials Cloud application, you go into this option, the Review REST API Services. And if you scroll down, you will be able to see a pretty long list of REST APIs available or exposed by Oracle for Oracle Financials Cloud application. So if you scroll down, you will be able to see a REST APIs to load in banks, bank branches, accounts, etc. And if you scroll down further, you will be able to see that you have options to load in AP invoices. So the payables invoices or payments, etc. And you have endpoints available, REST APIs available to load in receivables invoice. And when you go into any of these APIs, when you go into any of these REST APIs, click on it. And when you click on it, you see that in the REST terminology, everything is called as a resource. Okay, in the REST terminology, everything is called as a resource. So this receivables invoice REST endpoints, otherwise, every resource or for every entity or any REST API that is exposed by client, it will have 5 options or 5 resources, or this is rather called as a resource, and these options are called as endpoints. Every REST resource exposed by Oracle usually have these endpoints. And these endpoints will help you to perform CRUD operations. What does CRUD operation stands for? C-R-U-D. And every resource that you have in the REST APIs, it will have endpoints that will help you to perform CRUD operations, meaning to create that particular transaction or whatever it could be, the data entity could be. If it is a bank, create a bank. If it is receivables invoice, create a receivables invoice. Read endpoints, and under read, for read you have 2 endpoints. You have get one and you have a get all. Okay, so to read the data, you will have 2 endpoints. One endpoint will fetch all the invoices. Say, for example, if you take this example, this resource will help you to pull all the receivables invoice that exist in the instance, but this will help you to pull a specific invoice. Okay, and so you have options to pull all the invoices or a specific invoice by its ID, and you have an endpoint to update an invoice or delete an invoice. Okay, so you have an endpoint to update an invoice and to delete an invoice. So invoice is just an example. Since it's invoice, you are seeing endpoints related to receivables invoice. If it's a bank, so if you scroll up and say, for example, if you take bank, expand it, you see the same endpoints available, but for a bank. If you want to create a bank, delete or update a bank, use these endpoints. If you want to get all banks, use this. Get a particular bank, use this. So there will be these standard 5 standard endpoints exposed for every REST resource. Okay, and let's see how these works. So say, for example, I have this REST API called receivables invoice, API invoice. Okay. And I click on get all receivables invoices. So if I click on the resource again, if you scroll down for this resource, for receivables invoice resource, you have 5 endpoints. And if you look at these endpoints, every endpoint will have two important parameters. It will have a method and it will have a path. Okay. So the method that you need to use, this is basically a HTTP method that you use with REST endpoints. And the method that you use will depend on what operation you are performing or what that endpoint is all about. And typically when you are doing a read operation, you will use get method. And if you're creating something, you will have to use post method, delete method. And when you're updating it, you have a few options available, and you can use a put or a patch depending on the use case. So when you want to invoke a REST API, there are 2 things that you need to pass as input. You need to pass a URL and you need to pass a method. And you don't need to guess both the info the method as well as path. Both will be available in the documentation itself. Say, for example, I want to get all the receivables invoice that exist in the instance. How do I do it? To do that, I have a method called get. I need to use method called get, and I could also see that there is a path given here. And this path is nothing but, it is called as URI. URI. Okay, so a unique resource indicator. I'm not particularly sure on the full form. You can, or you can prefer, you can rather call it as a URI itself. Okay, or the path itself. So you can copy this path. So I need to invoke this endpoint now. And to invoke this endpoint, what do I need to do? I have used a get a bank in, or I have used a bank's resource in the previous session, but that's okay. And I want to invoke this endpoint to get all the receivables invoice from ERP Cloud. So I copy this endpoint, paste it here. So I get a method and a path from the documentation. And to this path, you need to prefix a base URL of the ERP Cloud instance. So this is a suffix, and to this string, you need to prefix the ERP Cloud instance link or ERP Cloud base URL. Every ERP Cloud instance will have a URL, right? So that URL or the instance URL needs to be prefixed to this. And let's try this out in ERP Cloud instance. In ECBP test ERP Cloud instance. So ECBP test till.com colon and a 443, use 443 as a port because it's a HTTPS connection that we are using. And this is an ERP Cloud based URL. So if you want to get all receivables invoice from ECBP test instance, you need to prefix this ERP Cloud based URL to the path given in the documentation. And if you want to get the REST endpoint that you can invoke, it is the base URL plus the path. Okay, and it's nothing but this URL followed by this path. Okay, copy this path. And to test the REST endpoints, you can do it from SOAP UI as well. You go to SOAP UI and you can test the REST endpoint from SOAP UI also. But I would recommend using Postman because this is a tool much easier to use than SOAP UI, especially when it comes to testing the REST services. So you just go to Google and type in a Postman and download the Postman. Any version is fine. Absolutely no dependency on the version. Just go ahead, download it and install it. And once you install it, you see a shortcut appearing like this. Open it And when you open it, you will have an option to send in a request. So you can, by default, when you come here, you might not see any request. Just click on add request and you enter the request URL there. Okay. So you enter the request URL, paste in the entire request URL, which is nothing but a REST endpoint, and you need to select the method. And what is it that you're trying to perform, or that you're trying to do here? You're trying to get all the receivables invoice, and I'm doing it by invoking this URL on the ECBP test instance. So that's why I prefix this URL. And the method is get method. So by default, when you create a request in Postman, it will have a get method. So you can stick to it and you can send the request. And when you send the request, what happens? You should see an unauthorized error, right? And it makes sense also, right? So any REST API given by Oracle, similar to SOAP service, they will be secured ones, meaning unless you pass in the valid authentication details of this particular ERP cloud instance, you will not be able to fetch the data from it or push the data to it, right? So to resolve that error, you can go to authorization tab, change it to basic authorization, and enter the details. Enter fusion.tech user. And let me get the password of fusion.tech user, guys. Just give me a minute. I've pasted in the password of fusion.tech user, and let me send the request now. And when I send in the request, I've got the details of the invoices back. So I copy this payload, go to SOAP UI, Notepad, and paste it in there. And let me just save it as all receivable invoices. And remember the data type that is used here, or the data that you're seeing here, it uses a different pattern, or it uses a different format. It's a JSON format. So I'll talk about it in a while. Let's park it for now. So you see that you've got back a collection of items, which are nothing but invoices in this case, and you see these individual items. Each of them is an invoice. So if you open the first one, expand it, you scroll down, and you will see an invoice number in there. You will see a transaction number. You see a transaction number. So with the help of this endpoint exposed by Oracle, I was able to pull all the receivables invoice that exist in the instance. Okay. And yeah, you will also be able to see all the details about the invoice. Like you have the links that are available. Okay. And if you scroll down, you will be able to see the second invoice details. So this is how you get all the invoice details from ERP Cloud with the help of this endpoint. But let's say I don't want to get all the invoice details. And if you want to get a particular invoice details, you can do so. But for that, you need to pass in a customer transaction ID as a template parameter or as an input. So at the end of the URL, so if you compare this endpoint with this, both have get method and the path is exactly the same on both the endpoints. It's just that you have a customer transaction ID defined as a template parameter. And if you pass in a value, put a slash, and if you pass in a customer transaction ID at the end as a template parameter, then only that particular transaction details will be pulled and displayed. So here, when we invoke this endpoint, we've got back a collection of response, a collection of invoices, right? So let's pick up a customer transaction ID of the first invoice. Let's go back to Postman, and we don't need to add in new request, just put a slash and add in the customer transaction ID and send in the request. And when you send in a request, and if you copy the payload now, and save this, save the invoice, and you see that you no longer see that collection, because this is, you don't see items and this rectangular bracket will indicate that it's a collection. It's a single invoice that was retrieved. And what transaction ID was retrieved? It's a same ID that you have passed in. Okay. So this way you can also pull a specific transaction details by its ID. And apart from this, it's not only about pulling the information from cloud. Yes, you can pull all the invoices or a specific invoice by its ID, but you could also create an invoice with the help of API. Say, for example, if you want to create a receivables invoice, click on create a receivables invoice, and you will be able to. And if you look at the endpoint, this path and this path is exactly the same, but the method is different. So if you want to create a receivables invoice, use the same endpoint URL without this slash, without this transaction ID. So you copy this, create a new request, paste it in there, but you change the method to post. And when you do this, it will this endpoint will create an invoice now. But for an invoice to be created, you have to pass the details to it, right? You need to mention what against which customer the invoice should be created and with what lines invoice should be created. And in such case, wherein you want to perform a create or a post operation, you will usually have to pass in the body. And if you want to see what is the payload or what is the sample payload that you need to pass into for an invoice to be created, if you click on create a receivables invoice, for the REST APIs and for the create REST endpoints especially, if you scroll down, you will be able to see the sample payloads given by Oracle. If you scroll down, you will see a sample request payload, and you will also be able to see the sample response payload. Okay, so you can test this API by passing in this particular payload. But for this payload to work, from this payload, all you need to understand is what fields you need to populate. But don't try to use the same data. So if you use the same data, verify whether this particular business unit exists or not. So there would be, and you also need to verify whether the transaction source exists or not, etc. Okay, so you need to understand what fields you need to pass from this payload, and you just have to copy the payload and then change the values appropriately. And I have a sample payload available with me that works in ECBP test instance. So let me show you that payload base. Just give me a minute. I'm trying to get the payload for a create receivables invoice. Yeah, I have a sample payload that available with me, and I can probably share this as well in the chat. But let's first test this payload and then I'll share it. So I have entered the details that will work in ECBP test instance. In ECBP test, we have a BU called construction define, and I've changed in the details. I've picked up a valid customer from the ECBP test instance. Okay, and I want to create this invoice with 2 lines. So I can say invoice line 1, 100 quantity, and the unit selling price is 100, or maybe, yeah, I can say 10 quantity and unit selling price is 100. Line number 2, quantity 20, and unit selling price, let me change this to 200. Okay, so I'm filling in, I'm passing only the bare minimum details required to create an invoice. So I copy this payload, and I'm trying to create, and I want to create this invoice in ECBP test instance in under construction BU. So you copy this, go to Postman tool. You change the method to post. So you picked up this path. You picked up this path, and to this path you have prefixed the ECBP test instance URL, and you change the method to post. And you go to the body tab, select raw, paste in the JSON payload, and you also change the text to JSON because this is a JSON payload, and you can format it if you want. And you can kick off the request. And you get the same unauthorized error. And to fix that, you go to authorization tab, select basic authorization, and send in the request now. And this API will create an invoice, and it will throwing some error. Let me get a different payload. I think I've tried out a different option there. Just give me a minute, guys. Let me just get a valid payload for this. Okay, I've got the valid payload now. Let me share this. Delete this one. And there is one problem with there is a problem with ECBP test instance. In ECBP test, if you try out this payload, so first let me show you the payload. It's the same payload. So we're trying to create an invoice in Dinesh US Retail BU. That's a different BU. And we're trying to create an invoice with two lines. A first line with quantity 1 and USPS 100. Second line with quantity 2 and USPS 200. Okay. But to create this invoice in Dinesh US Retail BU, use ECBP instance. Don't use ECBP test. If you use ECBP test, we're getting some error related to the setups. It says remit to address was not set up. But that's okay. You copy this and try to invoke this endpoint in ECBP instance. Authorization details, the same logins will work. Go to the body tab and paste in the details, and you can kick off the request. And when you kick off the request, it should create an invoice in ERP Cloud, and you should get back the details of the invoice that is created, like the customer transaction ID and other details. Okay, so you copy the payload or the response that you have got back. And I can probably save this as ECBP response. Yeah, I'll save this as response payload. Okay, and save it. And if you look at the response payload, in the response payload, you will see the details of the invoice that is created. You will have a transaction number in there. So you pick up the transaction number and go to ERP Cloud instance. You should be able to view the transaction, view this transaction in the billing screen. Let's validate that. Go to receivables, billing. And you go to manage transaction screen. And you search for a specific transaction. Okay, so you see the transaction created with the 2 lines that you have passed in as input. With the 2 lines that you have passed in as input, if you scroll down, you should be able to see 2 lines. First line with quantity 1, unit price 100. Second line with quantity 2 and unit price 200, and the total is 500. Okay. So yes, this way you can use the REST APIs given by Oracle. Say for example, you pick up any resource, you will find these CRUD endpoints, and you can use them to perform CRUD operations on that particular data entity in ERP Cloud. Okay, so you can get the details, you can create a request, and you can also update and delete as well. You can try them out. And it works exactly the same way if you pick up a REST APIs for a different application. So we have checked out a financials API, right? Similarly, if you go to cloud applications and if you go to HCM, you will also find a similar APIs in HCM as well. Say, for example, you go to human resources. You will have endpoints related to employees, jobs, positions. So you can use them again to perform the same operations. You can get the details. You can also push the details as well. Click on integrate again in the HR module. Yeah. Click on integrate. And click on the REST APIs, connect with REST APIs. And you will be able to see the REST APIs exposed by Oracle to interact with HCM Cloud. So if you scroll down, you will have APIs to pull the details of employee or get the details of an employee or create an employee. And you've got a number of other options as well to deal with workforce structures as well. You've got APIs to deal with them. Say, for example, if you want to get all employees, what do? You click on get all employees endpoint. You pick it up and you go to the endpoint that you have created. Okay, so to this endpoint, prefix the ECBP URL, prefix the ECBP instance URL followed by the port. Copy the endpoint, go to Postman, create a new request, go to authorization and select the basic authorization and kick off the request. I will try it out in ECPP test. So for this operation to work, you need to have a certain privileges assigned to this particular user. So this particular user should have the first of all, in first place, this user should have ability to or have access to the employees. Only then you will have the data fetched by the REST API. So these REST APIs also take into account the security factor. So when you try to get all the invoices using the get all invoices REST API, it will fetch only the invoices from the business units that you have got access to. In a similar way here, when you try to get all employees, it will fetch only the employees that you have got access to. Say for example, so this Fusion.tech user, I believe, does not have access to the employees or have the privilege required to pull the employees. So these REST APIs, they have a specific privilege required for each and every endpoint. Okay, and you have that information available in Authorize tab. So if you click on Authorize, okay, so if you on the Authorize tab, I believe you have a document which explains what privileges are required for each and every endpoint. Okay, so say for example, if you want to get this particular, if you want to use this API, you need to have this privilege assigned to the user that you are using. And similarly, say for example, if you want to pull employee details, let's scroll down quickly to go to Employees tab. So if you want to use the Employees REST API, you need to have this privilege assigned to the user with which you are invoking the API. Okay, so when you try to perform any of these operations on the API, so what are we trying to do? We're trying to get all the employees, right? And we are doing it with a Fusion.tech user. To this user, you need to have this privilege assigned in HCM Cloud application. Only then you will be able to get the employee details. Otherwise, you will see this forbidden request or forbidden error. And how to fix this? One way to fix this is, the long way is, log into the ECPP test or ECPP instance, create a custom role with this privilege. Where we know what a custom role and a privilege is, right? We have seen that in the security session. Create a custom job role with this privilege and assign that job role to Fusion.tech user. And then you kick off the API. After that, you should see the employees coming back. But to keep it simple, what I do is I will pick up an instance. I'll pick up a public cloud instance, which we will anyways need for the next use case or our next component. So we'll try to invoke this API in this URL. Probably what I can do is, instead of doing all that, I can share another credentials. Let me test this out. So this particular user, I believe, has access to the employees. So you could see that if you use these credentials, the CSI VARB logins, so this user has this privilege assigned. So this per REST access employees privilege assigned. And that's why you are able to see the employee details. Okay. So I will, in the chat, I'll share the two files. Let me share in the two files with everyone in the chat first.
Prasad, could you also share the credentials of the public instance?
Yeah, I will do it.
Okay, thank you.
ECPP response payload, and I'll be sharing the CSI VARB credentials, which you can use to test the employee API if you want. Otherwise, you can ignore it. Okay, only if you want to pull employee details or test REST API of the employees, you have to use a CSAV ARB logins. And I'm also pinging the public cloud credentials, which we would need for the next component that we're going to start. And you can also use this for practicing security. Okay. This is how you can use the REST APIs to perform the CRUD operations if you go back. And this is how you can use the REST APIs to perform the CRUD operations, be it financials or HCM. There will be resources exposed with 5 endpoints which you can use to perform CRUD operations, either in HCM or ERP cloud. Okay. And I could see a couple of questions posted by Stella. Let me address them. You have shared the password of Casey Brown, and to create a new REST API so the question from Stella is, can we, okay, I think he posted it to everyone. Yeah. So can we create a new REST API similar to the ones that Oracle has given, or extend a seeded one? You can do that, but to do that, you will have to use a product like Oracle Integration Cloud. So to extend the seeded REST API, to make use of it as part of an integration flow, you will have to use a product called Oracle Integration Cloud. Okay. So let's go back to the slides. And the REST APIs. And if you look at the payload that we used to create an invoice, this payload format, this is called as a JSON format. The extension is JSON. It stands for JavaScript Object Notation. And if you look at the payload, it's quite lightweight when compared to XML, right? So if you look at the XML payload, for each and every tag, you had the start tag and you had end tag also, right? And between those start and end tags, you had the actual value. But you don't have all that nonsense with JSON. It's a simple payload which goes into this curly braces, and it will be like a key value pair. Both of them will go into the inverted commas, and you will have a key in the inverted commas colon followed by the value. And if you have multiple values, separate them with comma. And if you want to, if you have a collection, that goes into these rectangular brackets. Okay. And since the JSON payload is quite lightweight, REST APIs deliver better performance when compared to SOAP. These REST APIs are relatively new when compared to SOAP services. And these REST APIs deliver better performance because it uses JSON payload and the JSON is quite lightweight. At the same time, don't think that REST services will only work with JSON. REST services can also accept XML payload. But if you use XML with REST services, you lose the benefit of, you lose that performance boost that you get with a JSON payload. Okay. So REST, in case you're interested in full form, it stands for Representational State Transfer. In REST terminology, everything is referred to as a resource. So we have seen invoice resource and we have seen employees resource, right? And each resource will have a few endpoints exposed to perform CRUD operations. And these REST services are lightweight, highly scalable and maintainable. And these are typically used to create APIs for web-based applications. And this is quite important. Any web-based application framework, any application framework that is available to build web applications, especially like VBCS or Angular or React, any application you take, any framework, if you want to pull the data, you will only be able to use REST APIs. Say, for example, if you take Visual Builder Cloud Service, which can be used to build web applications, from that framework or from those cloud services, wherein you build a web applications, you will only be able to invoke REST APIs. And that restriction was put in because REST APIs are believed to deliver better performance when compared to SOAP services. Okay. So since the REST APIs use JSON, which is quite lightweight, REST APIs deliver better performance, and hence they are preferred in web-based applications. Because it makes sense also, right? So if you browse, if you go to a website and if it takes 10 seconds to respond, there is a 1 in 100 chance that you might stick to the same page, right? So most of us would move on to the next link. So when it comes to web-based applications, performance is quite critical, and that's where the REST APIs come into picture. And that is one of the reasons why REST APIs are preferred when compared to SOAP services. Okay, and it has three fundamental elements that you need to worry about. It's a URI, or the path that it exposes, and the method. And it uses REST APIs use HTTP methods. And the type of data, as I mentioned, both XML and JSON can be used. But if you use XML, you lose the benefit that you get with REST services. And yeah, I've given, these are the sample links and payloads. This is for a SOAP service, and this is for REST APIs. And this is to create a bank. So I've used a bank resource here, a given bank resource here as an example. Okay. So you can use the payload that I've shared with you, and you can use invoices resource as an example and try to get all invoice details or create an invoice. Okay. Any questions, guys? Any questions in the web services?
Prasad, this is Viru.
Yes, Viru.
Regarding these REST services, right? And we are basically we are providing the services to third party, right? So all the services that you showed on the Oracle books, those are the services that can take a third party can take and connect with the Oracle cloud, right?
Correct.
So where do we let's say there is a Salesforce, okay? If they take one of the invoice service and they create the invoice, and once they post that, and if they say that in their side it is success, and in Oracle Cloud, where do we monitor? Like instead of directly going and checking it, okay, invoice has been created or not. So do we have any place where we can, go and monitor all the JSON or XML format? You know what I'm trying to ask?
Yeah. The simple answer is no such provision is available. Okay. So I've given you these endpoints. So Oracle says might answer the question this way. So it has given the endpoints, right? So these endpoints, as I started off, as I mentioned at the beginning of the web services session itself, that you have the REST APIs and the SOAP services that we'll be going through. But these building blocks are given as a tool for integration specialists. So when the integrations are being built in a product like Oracle Integration Cloud, and that's where you normally build integration flows. And in those integration flows, integration specialists will be consuming these REST APIs or the SOAP services. To answer your question first, to avoid the confusion, first let me answer your question in a plain way, and then I'll give you a little more context to it. If you invoke, say, any of this API from Salesforce, and if you want to monitor it in HCM Cloud, there is no way to do it. You cannot monitor it in HCM Cloud. You don't have a page which will show you what are the requests received from which application and whether it has gone through successfully or not. Okay, that's a simple answer.
Okay.
And to give you more context to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to add my question here so that it will be clear enough.
Yeah. Add.
Okay.
No, let's go on. Yeah, please.
Okay. So when Salesforce has
go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, when Salesforce has sent a request to Oracle HCM Cloud to create a employee, so how does that Salesforce side developer, confirm that okay, my work is submitted successfully, or the transaction is created successfully?
Okay, so it purely depends on the application that is sending in the request. In the case of Salesforce, you will set up a workflow rule and an action and you will there is a specific screen called outbound messages, and in there you can see whether the message has been sent over to HCM Cloud successfully or not, but it will not capture back the response. But the way it works is you will not invoke these APIs from Salesforce directly. Instead, you will plug these APIs, because if you look at these APIs, these are like the crude or the basic building blocks. You will have to do some pre-processing and post-processing on top of these APIs. And the way it typically works is in OIC, integration specialists will build the flows, which will do the pre-processing or enriching of the data, invoke these APIs to get the job done, and do the post-processing, such as sending the response back to Salesforce. So these are just the APIs. These are not the entire flows. These are not the integration flows, remember. So those integration flows will be built in OIC, and that integration flow will be invoked from Salesforce. And when you do that, you can monitor the requests of the integration flows that are built in OIC in a monitoring screen in OIC. So it's like you need to have an integration layer in between, wherein you can monitor such requests, do some pre and post processing with the help of integration flows, and that's where OIC comes into picture. Okay.
So what I get it with the current scenario, as a technical resource, I don't have anything to do from technical point of view. This, right?
Exactly. That's a first statement that I said when I started off the web services topic. You might use it only in a scenario wherein you have loaded a wrong data and you want to correct it. And to correct it, there is only a REST API available. In such case, you might look at the REST APIs available and prepare a payload as a one-off case, and you run it. You invoke that API to perform that update operation. Other than that, as a technical consultant, you won't use these APIs. These will be used in integration flow build in OIC. Okay. Any other questions, guys?
Yeah, Prasad. Yeah, already someone asked, I think so. Yes, sir. This DFA field done. So can we get it into like in seeded APIs?
Yeah, in the APIs will also give you a provision to pass in attribute values as well. So if you pass in attribute values, those values get loaded into DFFs. That should not be a problem. So we have passed in this payload, right? So in this payload, if you want to load in some attributes into some DFF values, you can also pass in attribute values, and that with those values get loaded into the DFFs. Okay. Yeah.
And one more thing, say, is there any chances like we have created some custom report? Your report. Yeah. So that one we want to expose to outside, like without the CPI. Cloud processing. No. What is that?
OIC.
Sorry, OIC. Yeah. OIC. Yeah. So is it? Can we send it to third-party system?
You have we have seen the list of standard services here, right? So when we went into financials, we have seen a bunch of services, and the same for human resources, right? Similarly, there is a web service called External Report WSS service. There is a one SOAP service which you can use to kick off a BIP report in ERP Cloud. Okay, so if I understand your question correctly, so you want to know how you can run a BIP report that you have created in ERP Cloud and pass on the output to other system. Is that your question?
Yes.
Yeah. Similar to this, so we picked up a journal import service, right? We went into financials and we picked up a journal import service and invoked it. Similarly, you have a service called External Report WSS service. Okay, so you have External Report WSS service. You can search about this. So this is again a standard SOAP service. And in this SOAP service, you have an operation called run report. To that run report operation, you pass in a report path that you want to execute, and you pass in the parameters. You will get back the output as base 64 format. because a file will be generated, right? When you run a BIP report, it could be a CSV file or a PDF file. That will be converted into a base64 format, and you will receive that as a response back when you invoke this service. So that base64 string you can pass on to the other application, and you ask that application to decode that. Okay. Yeah. So just go to Google and type in this one. You will find the logic that you need to execute to run a BIP report.
Yeah.
Any other questions, guys?
So one more thing. See, if everyone knowing that user ID, password, and that endpoint, so they can get the data from different networks. So, see, we want to restrict the network level. Like we should not go to the a different IP address where they are triggering. So that way we can.
I'm not particularly sure on. I believe you might reach out. You can reach out to the cloud support team, and you can probably say that on my ERP cloud instance, service only the requests that are coming from a specific IP range. You can probably have something set up with the help of Oracle Cloud on that. You won't be able to do it yourself, but I believe you can work with Oracle Cloud support team to set something up like that. I see your point, but yeah.
So have you had
if someone is able to
like
crack
the client, something like
you can whitelist or blacklist the IPs. That should be possible.
Okay.
Any other questions, guys? Okay. So I have a couple of questions on the DFF I have already addressed. We do get the response from ABA. But the application that is sending in the request should have the capability to read that. Okay, I'll not get into that discussion. Okay, so is this like SOA or BPEL calling these APIs or custom report and get the data? I'm not particularly sure. I think it's more like a discussion that you initiated on this Scylla. So do you have any questions for me on this particular topic? Okay, let's move on.
So all seeded services will have the REST and API, REST and SOAP, both we can have, no?
No, you will not have both. You will find, in some cases you might find both, but in most cases you will find only one of them. You might find a REST API or you might find a SOAP service. In some cases you might find both, but in most cases you will find either of them.
Oh, okay.
Okay? Yeah. And we're done with web services. Fast formulas will be covered by Ravi. It's a functional topic that he explains better than me. So we'll move on to a financial reporting center. And to give you a background of this, let me go back to the introduction session PPT and go to reporting options. If you look at the reporting options available in cloud, so if you have to report on transactional data, you have two options, right? You can create a BIP report or an OTBI report. And we've seen these options already. But if you have to report on GL balances, general ledger balances, then you can create reports using FRS, Financial Reporting Studio. So if you want to build a financial live statements like a trial balance report or an income statement report or a balance sheet report, such reports can be built using an FRS software. It is called as a Financial Reporting Center. So there are 3-4 terms associated with this. In ERP Cloud navigation options, there is a Financial Reporting Center work area. Financial Reporting Center is a work area from where you will be able to see and execute FRS reports. FRS stands for Financial Reporting Studio, which is a tool that you use to build FRS reports. Okay, so to report on GL balances, you can build FRS reports using a Financial Reporting Studio tool. I'll show you where to download and install it from. But yeah, to report on balances, FRS is one of the key options that you use to build a polished financial live statement reports. Okay. And apart from Financial Reporting Studio, you could also build the reports on GL balances using a SmartView. SmartView is nothing but a plugin in an Excel sheet. So you can download and install the SmartView plugin. And once you download and install it, you will be able to use the same steps that we do in the Financial Reporting Center report. So we'll follow a set of steps to create a FRS report, right? So you can follow the same set of steps here on the SmartView as well, and build a SmartView report. This is typically used to do some ad hoc analysis. So if a user wants to pull some balances and do some rough analysis or ad hoc analysis, in such cases, users will be building a quick SmartView report. But if it's a polished report that needs to be built, which needs to be exposed to the higher management, it will be typically built using FRS. It will be built as an FRS report. Okay, so we are looking at this particular reporting option now, Financial Reporting Studio or FRS reports. And these FRS reports, there are quite a few things that you need to know about FRS reports and how they work. It works in a quite different way when compared to BAP and OTBI. So what we do is, instead of straight away building an FRS report, okay, so instead of starting with a new report build, what we do is we will we will try to pick up a seeded report given by Oracle. There are many seeded FRC reports given by Oracle. We'll pick one of them and we will execute it, and we will look at the output in the application, and we will open the report. We will open the report definition. We'll open the report definition in the Financial Reporting Studio tool, and we'll try to do the comparison between the report output, standard report output, and the standard report, how Oracle has built it. So this way we try to understand all the features that you can plug into an FRC report, and we will also understand how Oracle has built a seeded FRC report. And once we are comfortable with the basics, and once we know what components can be included in an FRC report, then we'll go ahead and build an even more complex report from scratch tomorrow. And for this FRC report, we need to have some data available for at least past couple of years, for at least a few years. So for that reason, we will not be using ECBP instance, but instead we will use a public cloud instance, because we need a lot of seeded data to get a sensible output when you run those financial reports. So we'll be using a public cloud instance. I believe I've pinned this in the chat already. Yeah, we'll use this public cloud instance, and we will use a different user, not a Casey.Brown. Remember, in this instance, for all the users, the password will remain same. So we will not use Casey.Brown. Instead, we will use a user called Anita.Kennedy. So let's log into the instance, because this user has a general accountant role assigned, which is required to work with FRS reports. So I open up a browser, log into this public cloud instance as Anita.Kennedy. Okay, I've logged in as Anita.Kennedy, and to look at the navigation to go to FRC work area or a financial reporting center is to go to others tab, and you see a financial reporting center work area available. Click on it. And from this work area, you will be able to see all the FRS reports available in the instance. You see 3 tabs in there. Favorites, if you have marked some reports as favorites, FRS reports as favorites, they will appear there. Recent, the reports that you have executed recently. And if you go to all tab, you will be able to see all the FRS reports. And if you go to recent tab, and before we run any report, let me show you where you can download a tool called FRS, or a software called FRS, Financial Reporting Studio software. So you click on the tasks ribbon, Click on Open Workspace for financial applications. So once this page is launched, go to Tools and go to Install, and you see an option called Financial Reporting Studio. Click on it, and when you click on it, the FRS software download will be initiated. Okay, so you will see that the software download initiates, and approximately 150 MB file will get downloaded. I'll pause it because I already have that file downloaded. When you download this file, an executable file which is approximately 150 MB that gets downloaded, you will have this executable file downloaded. Do a right click and install it with admin privileges. I'm repeating it one more time. Don't just do a double click and install it. Do a right click and install it with admin privileges. Okay. So once you download and install FRS software, if you go to a search box and if you type in a Financial Reporting Studio, you will be able to see an application like this. Open it. And when you try to open it, it will ask you to log in. And you also have to mention the instance URL, username and password. Okay, let me copy the password. Paste in the password. Let me also copy the URL, till.com. Paste in the URL. And just click on OK. This will log you into the instance as Anita Road Kennedy. And once the tool loads in, you will be able to open any existing FRS reports or create a new one. Okay, so the tool has opened up, and you can create a new FRS report using the new report option, and you can open the existing FRS reports to see the definition of it. So the way we approach this is we go back to the reports, and we'll pick up one of the seeded report given by Oracle. Say for example, let's pick up this USA balance sheet report. Click on it. And the first thing that you're seeing is a prompt. So you're running an USA balance sheet report, and the report is prompting you to select the company segments for which you want to view the balance sheet report. And yes, for an FRS report, you can configure prompts to collect the parameters or the values that the user is interested in. Say, for example, in this case, we are asking user to select a company for which he wants to view the balance sheet report. We can also set up, and I'll not repeat this again and again, but all the features that you see in this seeded report, we are going to plug them into the custom report that we are going to build. Okay, we'll also see how to configure the prompt, and every other option that you're seeing in the report, we'll see how to plug them into a custom report as well tomorrow. Here, we're seeing a prompt asking user to select the company, and you could also see some default values in there. So there are two values selected, 101 company and a total company segment. If you're okay with the default values, click on OK. Or if you want to change the default values, you click on the search icon. It will take you to a member selection window, and you can change the values there if you want. Just click OK. And the balance sheet report gets generated for two company segments. and you look at the report output. So the report output is generated, and there are quite a few things in here that you need to understand before you build a new report. First of all, what I will do is I will open this report definition from the FRS tool. Okay, so that we can do a like-to-like comparison between the output and the report definition. So I'll open the report, and you need to go to a specific path to find FRS reports. I've given that path in the PPT. So you go to shared folders, and you go to custom folder. Fin folder. And under Fin folder, you have FR, which stands for financial reporting. Click on FR, and you will be able to find the seeded reports as well as the custom reports here. So you scroll down, and what is the report that we executed? USA balance sheet report, right? So that's a report output that we are seeing here. So select that USA balance sheet report and open it. Okay, let the report definition get loaded. And so what is the data source for this report? So you see the report output getting generated, but where are these balances pulled from? These balances are pulled from something called as Essbase Cube. So if you look at I think I've talked about the options available in there. So if you look at this particular slide, so there is something called as Essbase Cube, which is a multi-dimensional reporting cube available. It comes along with every GL cloud instance. It comes inbuilt, not inbuilt, or it comes with the application. So whenever client takes in a new GL cloud application, a general ledger cloud, they will also get an Essbase Cube, which will be attached to the GL cloud or a general ledger module. And what usually happens is, as part of the business flows, you will have transactions created in subledger modules, right? Be it purchasing, payables, or it could be payroll costing, or any other subledger. Transactions get created there, and any transaction that has a financial impact needs to be accounted, and accounting entries get generated in SLA. When you account an AR invoice for a payroll costing, accounting entries get generated there, and those entries need to be transferred to GL. And when you transfer them again, you can transfer them in summary or a detail mode. And yeah, it depends on the client, whether some clients might want to do it in summary mode and some clients might want to do it in detail mode. But yeah, till the time entries are transferred to GL, that's fine. But it could be a journal that has come to GL or that has been transferred to GL from subledger. Or in some cases, you might have transactions or journals directly created within the GL. Those transactions did not come from SLA, but those are created within GL itself directly. So whatever the transaction might be, whether it has come from SLA or created in GL directly, whenever you post a transaction in GL, not transfer, whenever you post a transaction in GL, whenever you post a journal, at that point, the balances of those accounts. So when what do you have on a journal? On a journal, you have lines, and for each line, you have an account combination, right? We have seen that in the journal FPDI load. And for each journal, you have a combination, code combination, and against that, you have a debit balance and a credit balance. When you post a journal in GL, the balances will be updated in Essbase Cube against that particular code combinations or against that particular accounts. And this Essbase Cube is a multi-dimensional reporting cube. It's a cube with multiple dimensions. And what will be the dimensions of this cube? All the segments that you define on an accounting flex field will be the dimensions of this cube. If you have an 8-segment accounting flex field structure, all those 8 segments will be dimensions of this cube. Say, for example, company, legal entity, account segment, cost center, department, etc. And apart from the accounting flex field segments, you will also have generic segments like accounting period. You will have a ledger name, and you will also have few more columns or few more dimensions in the Essbase Cube. And when the balance get posted to SBS Cube from GL, you don't need to do anything for this. Remember, you don't need to create an SBS Cube. You don't need to set up this pipeline. It happens automatically and it comes out of the box. Okay, this SBS Cube with a GL cloud, and the sync that happens will also happen automatically. So when you push a transaction, when you post a transaction in GL, balance automatically gets updated in SBS Cube. And this SBS Cube acts as a data source in FRS reports as well as a SmartView reports. So when you ran this report, when you executed this report, it has generated the output. It has hit the SBS Cube and it has pulled these balances from the SBS Cube. Okay, and that's a background about the data source. Just give me a minute, guys. And another important point is this FRS reports is available only for financial modules. It is typically used only for the financials. It's not available for HCM or other modules. Okay. And let's try to compare the report definition with the report output now. So if you look at the report output first, yes, in an FRS report, you can have a logo and a report heading. And since it's a balance sheet report, and a balance sheet report to typically have assets section and liabilities and stockholders equity section. Even if you look at any balance sheet report published by the companies, you will see the similar format there as well. So you will see an asset section, liabilities and stockholders equity section. And under assets, you have again the current assets, a list of current assets listed down, mentioned in there, along with the balances. And you have a summary column for the current assets displayed there, and you have other type of assets and a total sum of all the assets. And you have a similar story repeated for liabilities and stockholders equity, current liabilities, other liabilities, and the total. And you have the equity details printed. So if you look at these rows, so in a FRS report, the grid is important. So the table that you're seeing here, this is called as a grid. And in a table, you have rows and you have columns configured, right? So you see, what do you see as rows here? You see the rows as assets and liabilities, right? So let's pick up this row as an example. What do you see in there? In the output, you see accounts receivables as a text. But if you go back into the report definition, let's see how Oracle has built this report. So I hate to see these fuzzy lines or guidelines. If you also hate them, click on view, click on guidelines to take them off. And if you go to the current asset section, so you see the same layout that you see in the output as well. Okay, so the same output the output that you're seeing here is coming from this grid that is configured. Okay. And if you look under current assets, if you look at the second row, you see a text printed in the output. But if you look at the report definition, you see an account number tagged in there, right? So what this means is when Oracle has built the report, it has used the account numbers. It has used the account numbers of that particular assets. Say, for example, for accounts receivable, the topmost account is 12,000. So it has used the account number in the report definition. But if you print 12,000 here, it doesn't make sense, right? If you are a veteran in financials, you might probably know that 12,000 is an accounts receivable account. But unless otherwise, you would not know what 12,000 means. So to help the user understand what the balance is all about, you can give a custom heading to your account, custom heading to the row. So what Oracle did is as rows, it has configured the account numbers. So under current assets, first it has added in the cash account, second accounts receivable account, third other receivable accounts, fourth inventory account. And for these accounts, instead of displaying the account numbers, like instead of showing 11,000, 12,000, 13,000, 14,000 here, what it did, it has given the custom headings so that a report looks neat and clean and people will be able to easily understand what that balance is all about. Okay, so that's how Oracle configured the rows. So for this accounts receivable, even though we are seeing a static text here, we know that there is an account number called 12,000 used in the background. And what you're seeing here is a balance of 12,000 account number pulled from Essbase Cube. Okay, that's about the columns. That's about the rows. And in FRS report, you can have three types of rows. You can have a text row like this, which you will typically use for headings, and you can have a data row like this, wherein you tag the account numbers to pull the values. And you can also have a summary rows like this, a summary row, where you can use aggregate functions to sum up the balances and display the values there. Okay, three types of rows possible: text row, data row, and summary rows. And let's move on to the columns now. And you see the balance is displayed here, right? And you see two columns here with a blank column in between. A blank column is just used to separate the figures or to make it look more meaningful. Okay. So how did Oracle configure this? Yes, you have two columns configured with a blank column in between. But when we ran this report, nowhere we mentioned 12-19, right? We never mentioned that we want to see the balances for December 2019 period, right? But where did this come from? This has come from the default value assigned to accounting period point of view. Okay, so whatever accounting period was selected, and there was a default value assigned for accounting period. So this column has pulled the value assigned for accounting period point of view, and it has used it here. And this one, so if you look at the way this column is configured, what does it say? It says current point of view value for accounting period. So these options that you are seeing on top here, so these are nothing but a point of views. A point of views, they're called so because you can view the report balances, or you can run the report and view the balances from these point of views. You can view the balances for 12-19, and you can change the period, and you can view the balance sheet report from a different point of view. Similarly, you can change the ledger and view the balances from a different point of view. So these point of views, so you can add dimensions in an Essbase Cube. Remember, I mentioned that this Essbase Cube has dimensions, right? So those dimensions of Essbase Cube can be added as point of views, in an FRS report. And for those point of views, again, you can assign default value. So here accounting period point of view is added. Accounting period dimension is added as a point of view. And for that dimension, there is a default value of 12-19 assigned. And this column is configured in the report in such a way that it pulls the value, it takes a value from accounting period and displays the balances there. So the balance that you are seeing here, this 370, it is the balance of a cash account. Okay, 11,000 account, I believe, right? 11,000 account number in 12-19 period. Okay. So, and if you look at this column, you have a blank column again, and then you have another column, right? And you look at this period, it is displaying balances for 12-18. First of all, why 12-18? Usually, I hope most of you are already aware of it. Usually in the financial reports, whenever you do the comparison, you don't compare it with the previous period. Instead, you compare it with a previous period in the past year or in the past quarter. So whenever a company publishes a quarterly results, it compares the performance of this quarter with the same quarter in a previous year. They don't compare it with a previous quarter, right? And similarly, when you do the comparison, especially year-end reports like a balance sheet report, you try to compare it with a similar period in a previous year. You don't compare it with a previous period. You don't compare it with, say, 11-19. Instead, you compare it with a balances of a similar period in a previous year. Okay, so that's why you see, that's why Oracle wanted to display 12-18 here. But how did Oracle achieve this? In the report definition, what they did is they have configured this column as a relative member to the current point of view value. So this column is plain and simple. Look at the value of the accounting period and pull the balances. But this is a setup as a relative member to this, relative to this 12-19 minus 13. So we are doing a minus, Oracle is doing a minus 13 there. Why minus 13? In a period you have only 12, in a year you have 12 periods, right? So it should be minus 12. Minus 13 because you might also have an adjustment period. So 12 periods plus one adjustment period, it becomes 13. So if you take out minus 13 from 12-19, it becomes 12-18. So to see that these two values are being pulled from this 12-19, let's do a small change. Let's click on accounting period. Let's change the value and run it one more time. Let's say, for example, let's run it for 12-18. And what should happen? This should become 12-18 and the second column should become 12-17. You notice that the moment you change any point of view value, the report gets executed again and you will see the balances displayed. You see 12-18 because this is pulling direct value directly from here, and this is configured as relative of this minus 13, which means the same period in the previous year. And you see the balances pulled. And you see the point of views added, dimensions of SBS cube added as point of views, and you see a page here. And if you click on the pages, you see there is a drop down, right? And in the drop down, you see two values in there, 101 and company. Do you remember seeing them anywhere? When we ran the report, we got a prompt, right? And in that prompt, it was basically a prompt. It was a prompt to enter the company segments, right? So we went ahead and ran the report with the same with the default values of 101 and company. So whatever company value you selected in the prompt, they appear in this drop down. And by default, you are viewing the values of viewing the balance sheet report of 101 company now. And if you want to view the balance sheet report, consolidated of all the companies, then you select the company. You see that the balances will change. You see that the balances increased quite a bit here. So if you change it back to 101, you see the balances. This is 366. But the moment you change it to company, you see the balances change. So you can set up pages in such a way to look at the prompts or the values selected in the prompt and show them up as an LOV here. So if I click on done, let's run the report one more time. It will take us to the prompt. And this time I'll also include 102 just to show you how it works. Let's expand the company segment. All company segments. And select 102. I think it's pulled from, not from the hierarchy. It's okay. Select 102 and add it in. So apart from the default values of 101 and total company, I've added 102 as well now. Click on it. And I have three companies selected now, 101, 102 and company, total company. Click OK. And you will notice that in the pages drop down, you see 101 company and you will also see 102 as well. So how Oracle would have set this up? The way it would have set up is, for pages, it has selected a prompt for company. So prompt the user to enter, to select the company segments, and whatever company segments that user selects, show them in the drop down here. So that user can select the company segment for which he wants to view the balances and he can verify them. And we are viewing the output in HTML format at the moment. You can click on the drop down and you have different other formats available. Say, for example, you can view the output in PDF format as well. If you click on PDF, a PDF output will be generated and you will be able to see the balance sheet report. You see 3 pages because there are 3 companies. So the first page belongs to 101. Scroll down. Second page is for total company. And the third page is for 102 company. Okay, so you can have the output displayed in different formats again. And one of the biggest benefit of using FRS reports is, I repeat it again, one of the biggest benefit of using FRS reports is it gives you the drill through functionality. So what that means is if you see some abnormal figure or unusual figure in the output, you can easily figure out the culprit, because the FRS reports help you to or it gives you that drill through functionality, meaning if I want to figure out from which journals or from which accounts this balance has come from, I can click on it. When I click on it, a window pops up and I get 2 options again. I can use a drill to account inspector to figure out from which child accounts of 12,000 this balance has come from. And I can go to a drill to detail balances to figure out from what journals this balance has come from. So if you see some unusual figure here, you can use drill to detail balances and you can figure out what is the journal which has that unusual figure. And you can also figure out if that unusual journal has come from a subledger transaction. And within a matter of minutes, you can figure out what transaction was causing that unusual balance. So if you click on drill to the account inspector, you will notice the parent account number 12,000 with a balance. But if you expand it, you will be able to see the balances coming from the child segments or the child accounts. So you see the account number there, 12,000 and the balance, total balance. And if you expand it, you will be able to see the account numbers, child account numbers from which the balance has come from which this balance has come. And similarly, you can use the other option as well, like the journal balances. Okay, so this is the background that you need to understand before you build an FRS report. So with this knowledge, we'll go ahead and build a complex FRS report tomorrow, which is even more complex than this. Any questions, guys? Any questions in what we discussed today? Okay, I'll take this now. We'll meet again tomorrow, guys. Thank you.
Prasad?
Yes.
Yeah, can I
Yes,
have a one-on-one with you just for a minute or so once everyone leaves?
Yeah, sure. You can hang on in the call.
Okay. I'm just waiting for everyone to leave. I just have one concern. Prasad, while you were giving the demo, you mentioned.
Let me stop the recording, or else this will go to everyone.
Okay, great.